Good evening. On behalf of Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, welcome to our 2020 interview series with candidates for the Oregon House, Senate, and County Commissioner. My name is Bob Kaplan, and I will be your moderator for this interview. As a tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofit organization, SOCAN cannot endorse candidates, but we can offer constituents information on where candidates stand on issues related to our mission. The focus of these interviews is therefore limited to questions about climate and the environment. All candidates for the general election have been invited to participate in these interviews. Some have accepted and others have declined. Today, we will be speaking with Mary Middleton, a candidate for House District 4. Thank you, Mary, for joining us for this session. The format is simple. We will have 2 minutes for candidate introductions, followed by 9 questions, each read by me. The candidate will then have 2 minutes to answer each question. I will provide a warning when there is 10 seconds remaining, and then I will advise when the 2 minutes are up and we'll move on to the next question. The candidate will then have 2 minutes for closing remarks. To ensure a fair and balanced interview, all candidates receive the questions 7 days in advance and will be posed exactly the same questions. Also, to ensure fairness, there will be no follow-up questions. Mary Middleton, a candidate for House District 4, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bob. It's an honor to be here. So I'm running for House District 4, and I am doing that out of a sense of responsibility and commitment to my community. Back in 2014, I was the campaign manager for the genetically engineered plant ordinance in Josephine County, and I have a lot of contacts in doing that work and have been an advocate for farmers for more than 10 years, and I'm also a teacher. Those two things show a lot about me as a person, and the job that I do helps me to meet lots of people in the community and advocate on their behalf. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have this conversation tonight, and I thank you, especially during this time of the pandemic, helping to get my name out there and my message of the type of candidate that I am. I really appreciate this format that you're offering. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So our first question, the increasing droughts that we have been facing have resulted in frequent and substantial water shortages. Would you please explain what you think state government and agencies should do to address the increasingly difficult problems of water availability and water rights?
So ultimately, drought is an issue of climate change. I will support legislation to slow and reverse climate change so that we don't have so many droughts to battle. There are several practices that can be utilized. Some that I know a little bit about are regenerative agriculture and dry farming. As I've already stated, I've been an advocate for farmers for nearly a decade and support these practices. Regenerative agriculture will improve the water cycle. It reduces or negates any loss of topsoil, captures the carbon in the soil, and thus working to reverse climate change. So it's a very good solution. State governments can provide incentives to switch to regenerative practices and promote dry farming as well. I say that while also noting that I think we need to be careful not to overstep local authority. So the genetically engineered plant ordinance has been unable to be enforced since 2014. We won at the ballot with 58.6% of the vote, but we've been unable to enforce it due to an overreach of the legislature. Agricultural guidelines have always been a patchwork, relying on local farmers and agencies to create what works for the region. So I believe that's true with the genetically engineered plant ordinance and with agriculture in general. You know, the battle to protect our sources of water and to protect the people and the wildlife who depend on them is a common goal for everyone, or it should be.
Thank you. Our second question is Oregon's Forest Management Practices Act has not been revised for decades. Do you think it should be revised? And if so, how?
Yeah, I would support updating our forest management practices. That it hasn't been revised for decades is a little bit surprising. I want to be clear, I do not support any kind of timber tax. The industry here has been, in our region, has really been hit very hard. And so we need to, I think, bring all the stakeholders to the table. The timber companies, the firefighters, the Bureau of Land Management, the Oregon Department of Forestry, and also indigenous people of the region to collaborate and communicate effectively. We have to rely on science. We must rely on science and the experts in the field, while also considering and bringing in these indigenous practices that have been ignored for quite some time. That is one way to really come up with some good solutions to these complex problems. In Southern Oregon, we have mostly dry forests with some wet forests in the higher elevation areas, but Northern and Eastern Oregon will be very different. So we need regional forest management practices that make sense.
Thank you. Our third question, Oregon's wildlife management plan has included removal of wolves from the state endangered species list and a proposal to allow bear hunting along the wild and scenic Rogue River. Do you think it is important to conserve Oregon's bears, endangered wolves, and other wildlife species at risk? Please explain why and identify where this ranks in your list of priorities.
Thanks again, Bob. So I do plan to protect wildlife in general and will vote to protect wolves, bears, and all wildlife. I recently saw that there's a new law allowing the hunting of beavers in Oregon. And you may have heard the phrase, "I'm a beaver believer." That is actually the name of a very short film that talks about the importance of our beavers and how important they are to our ecosystem. Our beavers are far better irrigators and water protectors than we are. I will look for opportunities to shore up Oregon's laws protecting all wildlife. And I understand that we have lots of people in Oregon who want to hunt and use the opportunity to feed their families with what they've caught. And I'm not saying that we stop those practices, but we should not need to endanger animals in order to feed ourselves. That's really the bottom line. So we must work to provide the balance that is needed for all beings on the planet. Another, main point to get across here is that drought, timber, wildlife, climate, and social justice are all interwoven. These things are interdependent and reliant on each other. So we cannot fight effectively for just one of these issues without fighting for all of them. So you asked for a ranking, and I'm not really willing to rank those, but I am willing to fight them and name them as a priority.
Thank you. Given that some segments of Oregon's population suffer more extensively than most from adverse climate impacts and toxic pollution, how should we invest in correcting health and other social inequities as part of our response to climate change?
So I believe that we need to address inequities in our culture and society in general, and work towards an equitable society that treats all beings with respect. I will push for the state to value each person, neighborhood, and community, to recognize the value of humans over the commercial value of the property they inhabit. So if a project would pollute a rich suburb, it would also pollute the poor one, right? Access to healthcare and a good education are rights for all Oregonians, not just those who are affluent and can afford it. So if an LNG pipeline and terminal is too risky to the people of Portland, it is also too risky for the people of Southern Oregon. So I will fight for our rights in Southern Oregon. We need to provide access to healthcare in Oregon right now. That means protecting the Oregon Health Plan, which provides access to healthcare for about 30% of the residents in my district. So that's a very important program to protect. And we need to make sure that all Oregonians have that access.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our fifth question. How do you think the state should promote and invest in clean jobs and a green economy as part of our efforts to reboot the economy following the COVID-19 crisis?
So that's also a very good question. So I believe in investing in our future and the future of the future generations to also be able to live and prosper on Earth. Moving towards alternative fuels, energy sources that are not fossil fuels is one focus. Promoting and investing in regenerative agriculture is another. Those are two ideas that I can support, and I am certain that there are many others that we need to consider as we look for data-based solutions, look to science, bring everybody to the table, and collaborate. Collaboration is something that I really love to do. I love to work together to find the common solutions. So,
Great, thank you. Given the consensus among climate scientists that global warming is a reality and human activity is largely responsible, what do you think are Oregon's top 3 or 4 priorities to address the climate crisis?
great question. Tackling climate change requires urgent and ongoing action. It's really important that we reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. How many times have I said that already? And look for ways to correct the impact we've had on our planet, right? Humans caused this problem. I'll be looking for ways that any bills that we bring in could benefit District 4 and Southern Oregon. And the citizens from this district and all of Oregon deserve representatives who are willing to look for solutions to the crisis that we are in. Failure to do so could possibly result in an uninhabitable planet in our future. So here's some of the things I wrote down. I wrote, invest in Oregon's utility sector to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and support public ownership of utilities. I think that's a good idea that needs to be looked at. Invest in mass transportation options, a high-speed train to haul people and goods across Oregon would help. Invest in our youth and encourage entrepreneurs with green ideas to tackle the problem. We need more creative thinkers. Get big money out of Oregon politics and elections. That's a big factor here. We need some meaningful election reform and cap corporate contributions to politicians. And, you know, we need to protect the rights of peaceful protesters, right? All of these feed back to addressing our climate crisis. All of these are interwoven. And we need leaders who are not going to walk out of the building because they're not getting their way, who are going to show up and do their jobs and not stop the business of the day from happening.
Thank you. Do you support Governor Brown's Executive Order 2004 establishing an Oregon Climate Action Plan? And what elements of the executive order do you think should be strengthened and how?
So I do support that. I think Governor Brown did the right thing by signing that into law. We need to help our companies meet the requirements in the law, okay? We have one planet. We need to take care of it. The fact that emissions from the transportation sector are the single largest source of greenhouse emissions in Oregon is more proof that we need to create better solutions. As I said in the answer to the previous question, I think a high-speed train that can transport people and goods throughout Oregon is absolutely necessary. We have seen now that more people have found ways to complete their work from home. And so we need to incentivize that in the new normal. I watch a website that records the temperature of the earth. And when the United States shut down, it was amazing to see all of those red and orange hot areas turn to green and blue. When we stayed home, the earth was much cooler, right? The smog above LA lifted, the smog above Beijing lifted when we all stayed home. And so that's not possible for our economy to continue, but we can take the lessons learned from this unfortunate global pandemic and move them forward and use it to create the new normal that is going to be once this crisis is over.
Thank you. So fire ecologists argue that climate change is the single greatest contributor to wildfires. What do you think should be done in the short term and long term to address the problem of fire and smoke that's bedeviling Southern Oregon?
I don't know who included that word bedeviling, but I thought that was just genius. Um, so this is a huge issue for Oregon and in my district. You know, I've watched the intensity, we've all watched the intensity of wildfires increase, and we've grown pretty much accustomed to smoke-filled summers. Thankfully, not yet. But research suggests that this is not necessarily unexpected, right? For example, the Chetco fire, very big fire, only 7% of that was high intensity, perhaps causing some irreversible damage, while the remainder of it was a low intensity fire. I've been studying the climate summary that you all put out in my spare time. You put it out for Oregon Senate District 2, which contains House District 4. And that discusses the history of the wildfires from 1911 to 2017, and even considers forest fires over the past 3,000 years, which I thought was brilliant. It's very clear, again, this is a complex problem that is not solved by any one of the considerations that we would normally talk about, right? Logging or reduced logging, letting fires burn, thinning of forests, or any one type of fire suppression alone is not going to solve it by itself. The main point is that we have, or one point I haven't made yet, but I'm going to make it. We have the knowledge to solve this problem, but we need to collaborate and communicate effectively. So we got to rely on science and the experts that are in the field, while also considering, again, indigenous practices to come up with the solutions for this that are relevant to the region. I said before, we have mostly dry forests here and some wet forests. So this is a top concern for Oregonians and a top concern of mine.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, got to figure out how to turn this alarm off. Oh. Okay, thank you. The first time the alarm actually sounded. Our last question. Methane is a greenhouse gas 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Given the inevitable emissions of methane that would result from the proposed Pembina Jordan Cove LNG export facility and pipeline, please explain where you stand on the project and why you reached that conclusion.
So I've looked into this project a little bit. I am against the Jordan Cove LNG export facility and pipeline. Again, I'm going to say it again. We need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, and this pipeline will do nothing to change that. Given this amount of methane, Jordan Cove would become the #1 climate polluting facility in the state. So I commend our state agencies for doing their jobs in carefully reviewing and verifying what they could in the state permits submitted by the company Pembina. When some of those permits could not be given because health and safety issues could not be ensured, Governor Brown and the state of Oregon did the right thing by refusing to let federal permitting override our local concerns. That's great, right? So I will continue to protect Oregonians and our climate if given the chance to serve.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so now Mary, you may take up to 2 minutes for some closing remarks, and then I'll close up the session.
Well, I'd really like to just say that thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak to those who watch or are part of your group. I have been endorsed by the Oregon League of Conservation Voters. I think I can say that. And it's on my website. I'd love for you to go there and you can see some of the other issues that I stand up for that weren't covered in this interview. electmary2020.com is the easiest way to get there. And I believe in serving the community, and this area is so beautiful. We need our elected representatives to reflect the diversity of this area and to reflect the beliefs of the people who live here. So I really hope that I will get the chance to serve, and I do ask you for your vote and your support.
Well, thank you. This concludes this interview with Mary Middleton, a candidate for House District 4. Thank you very much, Mary, for joining us, to you for viewing, and to Carmen Prophet for driving the technology that made all of this possible.
Thank you, Bob.